Today we will learn about one of the many legends of the Imperium, a chaplain and a member of the proud and ancient chapter, the Blood Angels, which is perfect as it is this month the 2-year anniversary of Tacticus, and in honour of this they are launching, available now, the Blood Angels faction in-game, running with events throughout this month. Tacticus continues to add new heroes and factions, and from August 15th there will be in-game free gifts, exclusive rewards, unique missions, and various power-ups available. If you're new to Tacticus, you can try it today, as its free-to-play model offers a rewarding gameplay cycle of progression and achievement. Customize your forces with their own specific traits and strategies, and as with any game of this archetype, there are times to employ strategy and times to grind. But the devs have worked hard to balance this with community feedback to make it as engaging as possible, and personally I find this fits very well within the downtime windows I have available. For the campaigns, as well as the standard path, they can also be played as a mirror, where you take on the enemy role and securing components to ensure your squad strength becomes ever more critical. Fight quick turn-based battles in PvE or PvP, and join collaborative boss fights under your guild banner. Tacticus is the definitive mobile game for Warhammer 40,000, especially for those looking for a squad strategy game set in the grim darkness of the far future. Take command, unleash the rage of the Blood Angels, plus you can use my unique code for additional in-game benefits, Lootin 2BA, find it down below. Explore Tacticus and support the channel by using the QR code on screen now, or click the links below, and join the ever-growing community of Tacticus today. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, where war and suffering permeate the galaxy, there are many who stand against the tides of rage, hatred, bloodthirst, and vengeance that continually threaten to consume even the most stalwart of individuals. But the Blood Angels have, ever since the end of the heresy, remained more tarnished than others by the saturation of emotion that came as a result of the death of their Primarch. Despite this, they did not fall into darkness, and even 10,000 years later continue to stand as an example of those able to retain their nobility and honour against a black backdrop of tragedy. Born of the genetic legacy gifted to them by Sanguinius, the Blood Angels are one of the most iconic chapters of the Astartes, renowned for their balance in the art of war, paired with their artistry and appreciation of all things aesthetic. Yet beneath their cosmetically angelic veneer lies a dark, smouldering curse, a genetic flaw that lies at the back of every member of the chapter's mind. All who serve know that at some point in their life they will fall victim to this flaw. Its effects are irreversible, and it will send them into bouts of ever stronger and uncontrollable rage and a thirst for blood, the red thirst and the black rage. This duality within them will grow until it defines their very existence, which sees members of the Blood Angels descend into a haunting struggle between their noble aspirations and the raging monster within. One which will eventually see them separated from their brothers, destroyed in battle, either physically or mentally. The origins of the Blood Angels, as do all the Astartes, lie in the earliest days of the Imperium and the Great Crusade, a time when the Emperor of Mankind sought to reunite the scattered human colonies across the galaxy. Each of the 20 legions was founded upon the genetic material of their Primarch, and for the Blood Angels it was Sanguinius, an angelic figure with majestic wings, unmatched beauty, and most notable of all, powerful foresight. Sanguinius would be discovered upon the radiation-scorched world of Baal Secundus, where he had protected the tribes who lived there from the many mutants, a task he employed with unparalleled grace and compassion. Upon his reunion with the Emperor, Sanguinius brought his followers into the fold, transforming the nascent 9th Legion into the Blood Angels. Under his leadership, as was often true of all legions after reunification with the Primarch, the Legion would change and begin to emulate the behaviour and outlook of Sanguinius. So the Blood Angels would display a control and an execution in battle that honoured their Primarch's unerring grace and strength. Sanguinius himself was a paragon of virtue, a leader who inspired his warriors to feats of unimaginable valour, all of which remained foundational keystones of the Blood Angels through to the era Indomitus. As is well established, the heresy was one of the most destructive periods for humanity, and came close to leading us into total oblivion. For all who knew this time lost, but some of course lost far more than others. Several legions would lose their Primarchs, some even came close to outright annihilation. The destiny of the Blood Angels could not escape this scale of destruction that descended upon the Imperium, and would be forever altered during the galaxy-wide civil war that shattered all established norms. The loyalists of humanity were betrayed by the Warmaster Horus, leading to the terrible culmination of many years of war which ravaged the Imperium. And when finally the favoured son of the Emperor arrived in the Sol system and eventually in orbit above Terra itself, Sanguinius and his legion found themselves besieged on all sides, the Siege of Terra. The Blood Angels played a pivotal role in the conflict's most climactic moment, alongside the loyalist Primarchs and the Emperor himself, as they attempted to defend the Imperial Palace against the traitorous hordes. This event, though, was no simple siege. The warp consumed Terra in this moment. Reality, time and space itself began to unravel. This to me was notable for reasons we will consider shortly, but suffice to say the warp permeated all things, and its presence was felt perhaps more strongly here than anywhere it had before, as the power of all the Chaos Gods were concentrated into this singular conflict. Although I think perhaps we should note the singular caveat of the birth of Slaanesh, because that is obviously quite a significant warp event in material space. Sanguinius, through his powerful foresight, had understood that he must be present in the final confrontation, and despite the protestations of the Emperor, Sanguinius would transport, along with the Custodes and others, to the Vengeful Spirit to lead one of the most defining moments of Imperial lore, perhaps only second to the Emperor's fall and that of Malcador himself. And so it would be that Sanguinius confronted Horus alone aboard his ship the Vengeful Spirit. The battle was a clash of titans, yet it soon became apparent that with the channeled power of the gods running all through him, Sanguinius could in no way hope to best Horus. So to say that Sanguinius was slain by Horus is too small a word. Horus near tortured the Blood Angels Primarch, broke him physically and mentally, and left the shattered remains on the deck of the ship like a broken doll. It was an act so soul-destroying in the eyes of the Blood Angels that we could not describe this in words, other than to say that the psychic shockwave unleashed by the death of their Primarch consumed them, and for the first time unleashed what would forevermore be known as the Black Rage. All the Blood Angels were consumed by this bloodlust that drove them completely insane. They lashed out at each other, loyalists, traitors, like roaring monstrosities. They killed anything and anyone that came into their path with apparently no control at all. They lashed themselves against their enemy until their weapons, fists and bones shattered. They raged and raged until their own bodies were broken beyond recognition. For even the most seasoned and hardened of Astartes loyalists and traitor alike, this was an event that left them running in terror from the onslaught. Yet even after the fever of bloodthirsting darkness that consumed them broke, the death of Sanguinius left an indelible mark upon the Blood Angels, and there is a differentiation to make between the so-called Red Thirst and the Black Rage. For while the former can largely be controlled by the Brothers of the Blood Angels, the latter is an all-consuming madness that cannot be rectified. For any who are consumed by both, it is better they are simply put out of their misery, not least for the damage they could inflict upon others. These flaws are something that left the Blood Angels for millennia attempting to understand its cause, Was it a purely genetic flaw after the Primarch's contact with chaos in the Scattering? Was it due to their induction process known as insanguination, a psychic echo in the aftermath of the heresy, or a combination of all? The exact cause remains unknown, but it remains something that affects them to this day and which still manifests the black rage within them. Such an affliction remains a tragedy that will one day consume even the most exemplary Astartes of the chapter, and which has been seen to consume even new recruits into their number just as much as it does veteran Marines. For it seems ever more apparent that the thirst can affect anyone at any time and will lead them down a path to where they will eventually be consumed by that same berserker fury as the warriors of the Blood Angels who lost themselves totally in the shadow of their Primarch's death. For even though the time may be M41, those consumed by the rage demonstrate this just as their brothers did some 10,000 years earlier. They look to the skies and see unending hellfire and drop pods scorching the air. They see the palace of the Emperor and the great fortifications constructed at the behest of Rogul Dawn. They see the dead traitors all around them, for they believe they still fight in the last days of the heresy, reliving their Primarch's final moments in the eternal battle against Horus himself. So now, as the Imperium stands against the onslaught unleashed by Abaddon in the contemporary period, the Blood Angels continue to seek retribution and redemption for the death of the Primarch, and indirectly the flaws that plague them. In this time, the chapter is led by Commander Dante, one of the oldest living Astartes, whose leadership is marked by wisdom and resilience, and of course his endless frustration that he is somehow still alive. And that I have said before, we missed the comical opportunity for Dante to have lived for so long and then could have died attempting to cross the Primaris Rubicon. But alas, we were robbed of that, and so Dante continues on. But I do look forward to the day when Dante falls in battle and utters the words, "Ah, finally, my brothers, I welcome the peace of the end and to fight alongside the Emperor in eternity," only to then wake up a few hours later entombed within a dreadnought, ready to serve 10,000 more years. But these are my cruel imagined scenarios. Other notable figures are of course Brother Captain Tycho and the figure of today's focus, one Chaplain Lemartes. All serve in guiding their chapter, but none embody the struggle against their curse more so than Lemartes. But to speak briefly on Tycho, he was once the Blood Angels' greatest strike leader, rumoured to be Dante's protege and chosen successor, yet his subsequent fall into the Black Rage served as a grim reminder that even the chapter's best are vulnerable to its grip. Tycho assumed command of the Blood Angels' 3rd Company after his predecessor's death in the Second War for Armageddon. In an ambush, Tycho was struck by an Orc Weirdboy's psychic attack, paralysing half his face into a permanent grin. For Tycho, whose overwhelming passion for aesthetics matched any Blood Angels, this was a fate worse than death. Bitterness and rage began to consume him. Unable to endure the pity of his battle brothers, Tycho had a mask crafted to hide his disfigurement. But this gave him some peace. He regained his composure for the remainder of the campaign, but Tycho became more passionate in battle, especially when Orc blood was shed. In the aftermath, he struggled to find solace in the chapter Fortress, for all the sculptural and historical beauty he saw all around him only sought to remind him of his own flaws. Dante would assign him to permanent battle duty, but as Tycho's violent temperament grew, his tactics became reckless. And finally, as another war loomed on Armageddon, Tycho succumbed to the Black Rage and joined the Death Company. Here he would finally meet his end on Armageddon, tearing through the Orc defenders of Hive Tempestora with frenzied fury. His story, though, is one repeated throughout the millennia in the chapter's history, and it marks the critical importance of figures such as Chaplain Lemartes. Despite their struggles, the Blood Angels remain revered across the galaxy, their red-armoured forms both feared and respected, because they maintain a deep bond with their homeworld of Baal, from which they launched their crusades, striking with the fury of the angels against the enemies of humanity and those within Imperium Nihilus, where Baal now sits. In the eyes of others, though, the Blood Angels also remain a tragic reminder of the price of perfection, a noble lineage forever marred by the dark whispers of their own genetic curse. They have fielded innumerable figures of renown over the centuries, but today one figure of legend is recently reborn again in miniature form, Chaplain Lemartes. In the ever-pervasive shadows of the Great Rift in the 41st millennium, where embers of hope flicker tenuously against the irresistible void, the Blood Angels must harness all of their number to resist the consuming darkness of the Rift and the forces of chaos who seek to exploit this opportunity. Lemartes stands as a singular figure with the power to unleash a near mythical force within the Blood Angels' ranks, known of course as the Death Company. Both he and the Death Company embody this dual legacy of the Blood Angels, both honour and tragedy, serving in the role of both warrior priest and guardian to those lost to the Black Rage. Only Lemartes has remained able to stave off this all-consuming madness that consumes his brothers. And so, just as his Primarch 10,000 years previous, Lemartes' story is one of defiance against fate, a figure of unyielding strength and spiritual resilience who continues to wage a relentless war against all around him, but also within himself, to maintain his sanity and purpose amidst the swirling chaos of unending galactic war. In the vast, war-torn expanse of M41, few sights inspire as much dread as the Blood Angels' Death Company. For to witness their approach is to know your end is near, for few, if any, would survive to tell the tale. Clad in blackened power armour, adorned with the sigils of death and mourning, they are the living manifestation of the chapter's darkest curse. Driven mad by visions of their Primarch Sanguinius' final moments, the Death Company represents a permanent reminder of the chapter's most tragic moment in their history. The Death Company serves as both a warning and a motivator, for every Blood Angel knows they may one day succumb to the Black Rage before they meet their end in battle, and this remains an ever-present shadow upon their glorious chapter achievements. The awareness of this, though, instills a unique bond and solemnity among the Blood Angels. Not that all chapters do not also foster a deep sense of brotherhood, but there is some intangible bond between those of the Blood Angels that only they themselves can understand, and which manifests in something approaching urgency to achieve greatness before their inevitable fall. For if they survive and bring glory to the Imperium, a price must be still paid. For the few members of the Death Company who survive a battle, most will perish shortly afterwards, either of their irreparable wounds or through the mercy of the Redeemer of the Lost, whose duty it is to end their suffering. It is better this way, for those who do survive almost always fall victim to the all-consuming red thirst, turning them into ravenous creatures no better than beasts with an insatiable craving for flesh and blood. The presence of the Death Company also influences the Blood Angels' relationship with other Imperial forces. Some allies, for example, view the Death Company with awe, recognizing their ferocity as a powerful tool against the enemies of the Emperor, while others regard them with trepidation, wary of the uncontrollable violence they can unleash, both of which only adds to the mystique and complexity of how others perceive the Blood Angels, casting them as both paragons of virtue, yet also reminders of some of the Imperium's darkest hours, something that all should seek to avoid and prevent at all costs in the future. So, the Black Rage is often presumed to be either mental or just a deep genetic flaw, but it is in fact something of both, and also a devastating psychic affliction, one that affects both the Blood Angels and their successor chapters alike. This has been attributed to the fact that Sanguinius was not only a masterful warrior and leader, but also possessed significant psychic abilities. These connected him deeply with his legion and also the broader psychic currents of the warp, something that was not well understood in the early Imperium and the legions. So when Sanguinius faced Horus in the final cataclysmic confrontation aboard the Vengeful Spirit, the brutality and raw emotion of betrayal that was unleashed in the battle between them subsequently resulted in Sanguinius' horrific and prolonged death. This was an event of such profound psychic and emotional intensity that it left a permanent imprint upon the warp and his genetic descendants. It's never been described as such, but I always personally imagine this to be more akin to a micro warp god birth. The key word being micro, because we're talking about this occurring at a very, very small scale. Now also stay with me, because I don't mean the creation of any kind of warp entity in a literal sense. I'm only thinking about this in a comparable way that the birth of Slaanesh caused the Eye of Terror, say. Violent psychic events cause lasting imprints upon the warp, and that this can also connect with reality. That's all I'm trying to say, and this appears to have been what happened with Sanguinius. For as Sanguinius fell, his death was not merely a physical demise, but a psychic martyrdom that resonated throughout the galaxy. The trauma of his death sent ripples through the psychic bond shared with his legion, creating a permanent echo which manifests as the Black Rage. But it appears not only to be a psychic anomaly, but also genetic, and causes the Blood Angels to quite literally experience both the final hours of the heresy and the siege upon Terra, but also reliving their Primarch's final moments. This manifests as a berserker fury, with those believing they're reliving the Primarch's final battle, seeing those afflicted lose all sense of self, consumed by visions of Sanguinius' death, and the overwhelming need to exact vengeance upon the enemies of the Emperor. It is believed by many that Sanguinius' death created this psychic imprint upon the genetic structure of the Blood Angels themselves, and that's because the warp is more than capable of reaching out and distorting things in the physical material space. Unlike some of the other Primarchs, Sanguinius' psychic nature intertwined his emotional and psychic ability with his genetic code, so that via the immense trauma and emotional intensity of his death, this was then etched into the very gene seed of the Blood Angels, creating a memory that has persisted across generations and which seemingly has no means to resolve it. It also creates what is known as the Red Thirst. This memory becomes also activated under certain conditions, particularly during the heat of battle, where stress and adrenaline are at their peak, and when triggered, it overwhelms the individual's consciousness, replacing it with the memories and emotions of that last stand. And so for those who fall victim to either the Red Thirst or the Black Rage, their fate is effectively sealed, before there is no program or means by which to reverse or improve the condition. In the case of the Red Thirst, it will be something they need to monitor and contend with as best that they can. With the Black Rage, they will be inducted into the Death Company, where they serve as living weapons of unparalleled ferocity, given a final chance for glory and redemption, fighting on the front lines with no regard of their own survival. In battle, the Death Company is only unleashed as a vanguard of death and destruction. Their rage fuels them beyond the limits of ordinary Astartes, for they are a blade unsheathed, and seen as much more of a tool than a force to work with. Even Lemartes has only limited control over the Death Company, but this is still far preferable to having none at all. It is also fairly fitting that their final sacrifice is given a sense of purpose and spiritual significance. It transforms their curse into an act of penance and devotion, rather than just leading to mindless, wasted self-destruction. So while being condemned to serve in the Death Company could be seen as a tragic end for any Blood Angel Astartes, it actually allows them to attain a measure of honour and respect that they would not otherwise be afforded were they left to their own self-destructive, all-consuming rage. And while it's understandable how the Blood Angels felt the destructive agony of Sanguinius' death, the why is a little more complex. For there is often the view that this lies in a pure genetic flaw in the Blood Angels, one that was merely activated by the death of Sanguinius. Yet I've never personally felt that this fully explains the phenomena, most obviously because of the fact that the Black Rage is a condition so deeply connected to the idea of this psychic shockwave, a permanent resonance emanating from the warp. So I think, as is common, I should note that what appears to cause the condition in Blood Angels is this combination of genetic and psychic scarification that is present in them. But that becomes ever more problematic through their years and their experiences, one which is exacerbated by various individual factors such as combat experience, willpower, and just one's own fortitude as an Astartes, how they perceive and engage with their own history, as well as contemporary spiritual practices in collaboration with, say, chaplains and so on. But the warp is a dimension that mirrors and magnifies the emotions and thoughts of the material universe. Its existence and Sanguinius' own connection with it directly connects to the manifestation of the Black Rage. And with what we know of the warp, once something has influenced or appeared within the warp with a significant amount of power, it is eternal because of how time appears to function within the warp. So in my own view, Sanguinius' death occurred at this moment of the most immense emotional and psychic upheaval, leaving then a permanent stain within the warp. So whilst the death of Sanguinius has long since passed, and while it had an immediate and easily understandable impact upon the Blood Angels at that moment, the black rage that has cursed them ever since is somewhat different, because in this context, the black rage can be seen as something more akin to this psychic feedback loop, whereby the warp captured that moment of Sanguinius' death and then has kept it in this cyclical eternal reverberation through the warp that continuously echoes in the chapter of the Blood Angels at a metaphysical level. As often is the case when we start thinking about such things, we begin to go further afield and realise that very likely the Blood Angels are not merely inheritors of a genetic flaw, but are now forever bound to the warp by this psychic connection which ties them there in a bizarre twist of fate to the Primarch's final sacrifice. The Death Company exists as both a somber and necessary component of the Blood Angels' battle strategy. Despite their madness, these warriors are formidable assets. Their fury and resilience make them nearly unstoppable on the battlefield, capable of turning the tide in the most desperate situations. In a larger sense, each battle fought by the Death Company is a final sacrament, a chance to die gloriously in the name of the Emperor and their fallen Primarch. The deployment of the Death Company is a critical decision for any Blood Angels commander, for their sheer ferocity makes them invaluable for breaking enemy lines, storming fortifications, or countering enemy assaults. At the same time, their uncontrollable nature poses significant risks to both allies and strategic objectives. Before a battle, chaplains conduct rituals to prepare the Death Company for combat, seeking to channel their fury against the enemy. These rites are both a spiritual balm and a pragmatic measure, intended to focus the black rage toward the chapter's enemies and not against their own. Their distinctive black armour marked with blood-red crosses and skulls is deliberately in a stark contrast to the vibrant red of the Blood Angels' standard armour, and serves as a visual symbol of their sacrifice, but also impending demise. Because the warriors of the Death Company are quite obviously on borrowed time. They are literally dead men walking, equipped with their chainswords, power weapons and other melee implements, all of which are best applied to allow them to unleash their furious rage in close quarters, where it is most effective both practically and as a means to break enemy morale. Of course, once unleashed, the Death Company can be very much a double-edged sword, which is why to allow them to descend upon a battlefield is a critical decision, often a last decision for any Blood Angels commander, because once released, they cannot be easily recalled. Their rage-fueled attacks may not distinguish between friend and foe, in contrast to other Astartes who are often noted as fighting in near silence. The terrifying, unmistakable roar of the Death Company, filled even in the contemporary time with the tangible anguish of Sanguinius' death, cascading across a battlefield, striking terror and panic into the hearts of their foe. The only thing that can control and rein in the momentum of rage unleashed in the Death Company is Chaplain Lemartes. Lemartes' own personal journey began on the irradiated wastelands of Baal itself, the homeworld of the Blood Angels, and where one person's survival would be a testament to individual strength. As a youth, he exhibited extraordinary resilience and, perhaps more importantly for him later, a deep-seated faith in the Emperor, qualities that marked him as a prime candidate for induction into the ranks of the Astartes. Upon joining the Blood Angels, Lemartes excelled in his training, demonstrating exceptional martial prowess and an unwavering dedication to the chapter's ideals. And so he quickly rose through the ranks, his path marked by a series of trials which honed his skills and steeled his resolve. He was soon drawn to the chaplaincy, where his fervent belief in the Emperor's divine mandate found its true expression, and as a chaplain he embraced the role of spiritual guide and enforcer of discipline, his sermons igniting the hearts of his brothers with the burning zeal of righteous fury. Unfortunately for Lemartes, during a brutal campaign against the Orcs, he would experience the first stirrings of the Black Rage. Caught in the midst of a frenzied melee, he felt the unknown sting of encroaching psychic madness that began to overwhelm him. The vision of Sanguinus' death searing his mind. Something that is often not described clearly, though, is that for those who experience this feeling, they are very clearly transported back to the battles during the Siege of Terror. They will look around themselves, see the palace, see those around them fighting to resist the traitors, and so their actions in reality bear no relation to what they are seeing in their mind. For them, the war they wage is entirely real, even if nothing more than an actual lucid vision. In the case of Lemartes, though, unlike others who became lost in their own minds, falling down into the dark madness of psychic despair, spiraling through levels of consciousness, he did not succumb to the curse. Lemartes fought back with that sheer force of will unseen in so many others, and perhaps because where others attempted to resist the nightmare but are ultimately unable to prevent it from smothering their minds, he channeled his anguish and wrath into a focused determination. That discipline he learned as a chaplain allowed him to retain his sanity, but which also left him suffering the horrifying visions of the heresy to replay in his mind over and over again. In this, Lemartes is a unique individual, for it leaves him to balance on a knife edge between madness and discipline. However he came to be able to focus such mental fortitude, it saved him and would see his appointment as the Guardian of the Lost. In this role, he became one of the only Blood Angels able to be responsible for his brothers in the Death Company. For while those warriors are irreversibly consumed by the Black Rage, Lemartes was not only able to lead them into battle, but also ensure that their sacrifice served a greater purpose, transforming their torment into a weapon of salvation. He also exhibited an ability through his own suffering of the Black Rage to reach out to them to a degree, give them orders by sharing in the visions. And whilst not always effective, Lemartes exists as a legendary figure of the Imperium, and for those who are lost, he will present their only chance at redemption. The Death Company's only leader, Lemartes' career is studded with remarkable feats of valour and tactical brilliance. His name has become synonymous with the most ferocious engagements fought by the Blood Angels and the Death Company. In the wars for Armageddon, they played a crucial role in the defence of the planet against the overwhelming Orc War, led by Ghazghkull Thraka, with the Death Company spearheading a counter-offensive that shattered Orc lines. Cleaving through the Xenos with relentless fury, they demonstrated an unleashing of pure rage that was unfamiliar even to the Xenos. His leadership not only secured key strategic points, but inspired a beleaguered Imperial defense to rally and repel the invaders. In another deployment during the battle for Legathon, a key industrial world vital to the Imperium's war efforts, the planet's multiple hive cities fell victim to a plague of rage. This was fomented by a Chaos Warband, and while the forces of the Mordians had attempted to put down and quell the explosion of violence, they were vastly outnumbered by the poorly equipped but relentless raging hive citizens who numbered in the many millions. Lemartes was strategically deployed here to lead the Death Company in a tactic that was described as rage to fight rage. A significant aspect of this deployment is Lemartes' battle against his inner demons. The novel provides a detailed exploration of his thoughts and emotions as he grapples with his unique condition, suffering from the Black Rage, yet retaining his sanity and leadership capabilities. I do recommend the titled novella Lemartes for those wanting a more in-depth vision of how it is to fight and command while being consumed by the Black Rage. Once upon the world, the Death Company, using their unparalleled ferocity, would break the enemy, serving as a spearhead to crush those where other Imperials did not have the unrestrained fury to put down. Lemartes' leadership and unwavering faith became instrumental in turning the tide of battle, for through his presence alone, in his ability to direct the Death Company, this led to the decisive victory which ultimately saves the planet from destruction. But this engagement highlights his unique position within the Blood Angels as a guardian of the lost, but it also displays the small glimmer of hope that even those afflicted by madness can achieve redemption through sacrifice and valour. So it goes without saying that Lemartes' legacy within the Blood Angels is that of legend. His name is spoken with reverence and awe by his brothers. His presence continues to be a stark reminder of their cursed inheritance and the enduring struggle against the Black Rage. Yet through his efforts, Lemartes offers a glimmer of redemption, a path for all to aspire to in reclaiming their honour through sacrifice. More than this, he is the steadying hand that keeps those who are on the precipice from falling into terminal, immediate despair. He can guide his brothers of the Red Thirst or the Black Rage and help them fight on, at least for a time. His sermons and teachings resonate deeply within the chapter, instilling a sense of purpose and duty which transcends the individual. For under Lemartes' guidance, the Death Company has become more than just a tool of war. It is a crucible of redemption, where those lost to madness can find absolution, and he alone has elevated the status of the Death Company within the chapter. Their sacrifice is viewed no longer merely as a bleak and depressing curse, but as an unavoidable, perhaps even necessary, service to the Imperium. In the all-consuming darkness of the 41st millennium, which sees humanity stand on the precipice more than ever, it could be hard for even those among the Astartes to keep the faith. Something made ever worse by the looming prospect of descending into a raging bloodlust that takes away your sanity. For the Brotherhood of the Blood Angels, their focus and morale is bolstered by the likes of figures of legend such as Lemartes, who continues to exist as a beacon of hope and defiance, for he is the guardian of lost souls, a warrior priest whose faith burns so brightly as to burn away the encroaching darkness itself, an individual who through his actions continues to uphold the legacy of sanguineous defiance in the face of certain death. Lemartes is a figure of 40k legend because he ensures that the spirit of the Primarch lives on in every battle cry, every fallen brother, every act of sacrifice. Far more than simply a leader, he is a paragon of the Blood Angels' eternal quest for redemption in the face of unrelenting darkness. The Death Company continues to serve as an all too painful living reminder of the Blood Angels' cursed legacy. Every battle fought forces them to relive the horror of the screaming nightmare and unbearable agony that they all shared in Sanguinius' death. Every day continues the ongoing struggle to resist the hungering thirst, the genetic flaws that threaten to consume them all. Those within the Death Company, whether consciously aware or not, practice a dark form of redemption, fulfilling their ultimate purpose as instruments of the Emperor's destructive wrath and vengeance. Their continued existence stands as a haunting reminder of the fine line between salvation and damnation, and in a purer sense, the continuing struggle between light and darkness within the hearts of the Emperor's chosen sons. For no matter the time when Lemartes finally passes into complete darkness and must be given the final mercy of the Emperor, he will remain within the hallowed halls of the Blood Angels, a symbol of courage and faith that will inspire countless generations of Astartes, all of whom will study and learn from his example that even when all seems lost and the raging despair comes for you, as long as warriors the likes of Lemartes exert the sheer power of will, then the light of humanity shall never be extinguished.